Ellie Winslow was 7 years old when she first saw the German Shepherd. She was sitting on the old wooden swing in her grandmother's backyard, legs too short to push herself properly, staring past the chain-link fence that separated their lawn from a tangled patch of woods. That's when the dog stepped out of the underbrush, thin, alert, and limping slightly. Following close behind her were 3 tiny, wobbly pups that barely made it over the roots. Ellie didn't speak. She just watched. And the dog watched her right back. Her grandmother, Martha, had warned her to stay away from the woods and not to approach strays. Could have rabies or worse, she'd said, while stirring soup. But Ellie wasn't afraid. The shepherd, whom she immediately named Maple, didn't look dangerous. She looked tired. So for the next week, Ellie came to the same spot every day after school and sat on the swing, watching Maple nurse her pups in a sun-dappled clearing just beyond the fence. She brought bits of bread and turkey slices and tossed them gently through the wire. Maple would never eat until the pups were full. Ellie liked that. She told no one, not her teacher, not her grandma. It felt like their secret. But everything changed one Thursday afternoon. It was quieter than usual. No birds chirping, no dogs barking from neighboring yards. Ellie was sitting cross-legged in the grass, munching a granola bar, when she saw Maple tense. The mother dog stood stiff, ears pinned back, and motioned her pups behind a hollow tree trunk with a low grunt. That's when Ellie noticed something moving behind the rotted shed that sat forgotten at the edge of the woods. At first it looked like a branch swaying in the wind. Then she saw it. A hand. Pale, thin, trembling. It crept out from behind the shed wall, fingers inching forward toward one of the pups who had strayed too far. The pup sniffed at the air, then yelped suddenly and backed away. The hand jerked and then, in an instant, disappeared back into the shadows. Ellie shot to her feet, heart pounding like thunder in her chest. Maple was snarling now, hackles raised, placing herself between her babies and the shed. The air felt suddenly colder. Ellie stumbled backward and ran to the porch, breath short and chest tight. She burst into the kitchen where her grandmother was folding laundry. "There's someone behind the shed," Ellie blurted out. Martha looked up, frowning. "What kind of someone?" I don't know. A person." I saw their hand. It was trying to grab the puppy. Martha squinted through the kitchen window. "Ellie, those woods are full of raccoons and God knows what else. You probably saw a branch or an animal." Ellie shook her head hard. "It was a person, I promise." Her grandmother sighed, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "All right, I'll go look." But by the time they reached the fence, the clearing was empty. The pups were nestled quietly beside Maple. The shed stood still, silent and unremarkable. "There's no one there," Martha said gently. "Your eyes are playing tricks." But Ellie knew what she saw. She wasn't imagining it. That hand was real, and it had reached out toward the pup like it had done it before. That night, as Ellie lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning above her, she thought about Maple's eyes. How they hadn't just looked at her, they looked into her, as if asking her to understand something no one else could. And the hand, the way it shook, the way it retreated, it wasn't trying to hurt the pup. It looked like it needed help. Ellie couldn't sleep. The image of that trembling hand kept flashing in her mind, like a broken movie reel. It hadn't tried to grab the pup aggressively, more like it had reached out weakly, as if pleading. And Maple hadn't attacked, not right away. She had only growled when the pup yelped. The next morning was a Saturday. Ellie waited until her grandmother was busy preparing breakfast and slipped out with a slice of toast in her pocket and her flashlight clutched tightly in her fist. She crept through the dew-wet grass toward the fence. Maple was there, lying with the pup snuggled around her belly, eyes half closed but alert. Ellie whispered softly through the fence, "Hey girl, it's me." Maple raised her head slightly, but didn't bark or move. That was her unspoken permission. Ellie crawled under the loose part of the fence, a spot she'd discovered weeks ago and never told anyone about. Her shoes squished into the muddy leaves as she moved toward the shed, heartbeat thumping like a drum. The shed had once been used to store firewood or tools, but now it leaned to one side like it was sighing. A corner of its wooden wall had caved, in revealing a narrow opening. Ellie crouched low and peeked through it. Nothing, just dark. She inched closer, breathing through her mouth. Then she heard it, a shuffle followed by a soft cough. Then a whisper. "Is she gone?" Ellie froze. The voice was hoarse, young, and scared. She gathered every ounce of courage and whispered back, "Who are you?" There was a pause. A shadow shifted inside the shed. Then came the voice again, low and desperate. "Please don't tell anyone I'm here. I'm not going to hurt you, or the dogs." Ellie swallowed hard. "Then why are you hiding?" Another silence. Then the voice said, "Because they're looking for me, and they're not good people." Ellie hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pulled out the toast, carefully pushing it through the hole in the shed. For a second, nothing happened. Then a hand emerged again, the same one from yesterday, dirty, shaking. It snatched the toast like it hadn't eaten in days. "What's your name?" she whispered. "Toby," came the reply. "I'm 15. 15? Ellie's eyes widened. That wasn't a man, it was just a kid. "Where are you from?" He didn't answer right away. She heard chewing and a sniffle. Then, "I was in a foster home. I ran. I had to." Ellie sat there quietly, unsure what to say. Maple appeared beside her suddenly, the pups tumbling behind her. She padded toward the shed and lay down right beside it. Tail curled around her pups, eyes half closed, not guarding, resting. "She's been watching me," Toby said softly. "She doesn't let anyone near me but you." Ellie looked at Maple, her golden eyes flickering calmly toward Toby's voice, then toward Ellie as if saying, "He's not dangerous, he's just broken." "Why did you come here?" Ellie asked. "I don't know. I was just following her. I saw her near the gas station. Figured maybe if I followed her I'd find somewhere safe." His voice trembled. "I didn't think anyone would ever find me." Ellie looked around. The woods were still and quiet, but something about the silence felt off, like they were being watched. Suddenly Maple stood up, ears perked sharply, staring into the brush behind the shed. A low growl rumbled from her throat. "What is it?" Ellie whispered. Then Toby said, panic rising in his voice, "You should go. Now." "Why?" "Because I think someone followed me yesterday. And if they find you here—" Ellie's chest tightened. She nodded slowly, backing away. "I'll come back tomorrow, I promise." Toby didn't respond. As she crawled back through the fence and raced up the porch steps, her mind spun in a million directions. Who was after Toby? Why was Maple protecting him? And why did it feel like someone else was just out of sight, waiting? Ellie spent the rest of the day in a daze. Every sound seemed sharper. Every car passing on the gravel road made her heart jump. At dinner, she barely touched her mashed potatoes. Her grandmother noticed. "You feeling all right, baby?" Ellie hesitated. Her fork scraped the plate. She looked up. "Grandma, did you ever hear about a boy named Toby?" Martha narrowed her eyes slightly. "Toby who?" I don't know his last name. But maybe someone who went missing." Martha leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "Where'd you hear that name?" Ellie felt her throat tighten. She didn't want to lie, but she couldn't betray Toby either. "I read something at school, that's all." Martha's lips thinned. "I remember a Toby, long time ago, quiet boy. Lived a few blocks over with his mama. Sweet lady, worked nights at the nursing home, then one day they were both just gone. No warning. Folks said she ran off." "Ran off?" Ellie echoed. "Well, that's what people thought. There were whispers, sure. She had a boyfriend, real rough type. Drank a lot, got into fights at the bar, but nothing was ever proven." Martha's voice turned grave. "I always thought something bad happened. But you don't say those things out loud, unless you have proof." Ellie gripped her glass tightly. The room felt colder again. "Do you think Toby could still be around?" Martha studied her closely. "Why do you ask, Ellie?" But Ellie didn't answer. She just shrugged and asked to be excused. The next morning, Ellie was at the shed before sunrise. She brought a PB&J sandwich, a juice box, and a small first aid kit she'd stolen from the bathroom cabinet. Maple was already waiting, Her body curled protectively around the pups. She gave a soft grunt as Ellie approached, tail thumping once. Ellie knelt beside the collapsed section of the shed. "Toby," she whispered. No answer. She peeked through. The hole and froze. Toby was sitting in the far corner, hugging his knees, eyes red-rimmed and hollow. His shirt was torn, and there was a fresh scrape on his cheek. "Did someone come last night?" Ellie asked, barely breathing. Toby nodded. Slowly. "I think so. I heard footsteps, and someone whispered my name." Ellie handed him the sandwich and juice. "You need to let someone help you. My grandma—" "No." His voice cracked. "I can't go back. If they find me, I'll disappear again." "Who?" Ellie asked. "Who's after you?" Toby looked down. "After my mum vanished, I got put in foster care. The man she dated, he tried to adopt me, said I was his responsibility." He swallowed. "But he wasn't. He wasn't even on my birth certificate." Ellie's hands trembled. "What happened?" Toby pulled up the sleeve of his hoodie just a bit, revealing faint bruises. "He said if I ever told anyone, I'd end up like my mom." Ellie felt the breath leave her body. Her chest hurt with anger. "I ran the first chance I got," Toby whispered. "Been hiding ever since. Then I saw Maple. I thought maybe if she was taking care of her babies, she might help me, too." Ellie's eyes welled up. "You don't deserve any of that. You didn't do anything wrong." Maple rested her head gently against the shed wall as if agreeing. Toby managed a weak smile. "I don't know why she trusts me, or why you do." "Because you're not bad," Ellie said firmly. "You're just hurt." Suddenly, Maple let out a sharp bark. Her head snapped toward the woods. Ellie ducked instinctively as something snapped behind a tree. Footsteps fast, then gone. Toby's face turned white. "It's him," he whispered. "He's close." Ellie felt a chill race up her spine. She helped Toby close the shed gap with leaves and old planks, then ran back through the fence. She didn't care if her grandmother grounded her for a week. Toby wasn't just hiding. He was running from someone who wanted him silenced. And now they both might be in danger. Ellie couldn't sit still. Her foot tapped the floor all through breakfast. She kept watching the kitchen window, eyes darting to the woods. Every creak in the house made her tense. She was sure the man Toby feared had found him, and worse, seen her. By mid-morning, her grandmother finally snapped her book shut. "All right, little lady." "Spill it." Ellie's spoon paused in her cereal. "What?" "You've been jumpy as a June bug in church. What's going on?" Ellie bit her lip. Her brain scrambled for a lie, but her heart burned with truth. "You remember Toby?" She asked slowly. Martha's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. "Yes, he's not gone. He's hiding in the woods, behind the old shed." He followed Maple and the pups. Martha stood so fast her chair scraped back. "Ellie Winslow, what did you just say?" Ellie explained everything, quietly, nervously, watching her grandma's face tighten with each word. About the hand, the voice, the bruises, the whisper in the night. By the time she finished, Martha was already grabbing her keys. "You're not going near those woods again," she said. "Not alone. And not until I know who this boy is, and who might be looking for him." "Wait!" Ellie cried. "You can't tell anyone yet. He's scared." "He said someone dangerous is looking for him." Martha paused at the door, her mouth a tight line. "If what you're saying is true, Ellie, then he needs help, real help. And if someone is after him, he won't be safe out there much longer." That afternoon, Martha made calls. First to her friend Helen, a retired nurse who once worked with Child Protective Services, then to Sheriff Donnelly, an old schoolmate with a sharp instinct for when someone was lying. Martha was careful not to mention Toby's hiding place. Not yet. By evening, she sat by the living room window with a pair of binoculars and a cup of cold coffee. Ellie curled beside her under a quilt. Around dusk, a brown pickup truck slowed near the edge of the woods. It didn't stop, just rolled forward, then reversed slightly. The driver looked toward the shed. Martha raised the binoculars. A man with a crooked nose and greasy black hair, mid-40s. He looked around too carefully. Then he tossed a crumpled fast food wrapper into the brush and drove off. "That him?" she asked softly. Ellie squinted. "I don't know. But Toby said someone whispered his name outside the shed." Martha muttered something under her breath and disappeared into the kitchen. She came back with an old cardboard box and dropped it on the table. Inside were newspaper clippings, dusty envelopes, and Old Town newsletters. "I don't forget things," she said, flipping through the pile. She pulled out a yellowed newspaper dated October 3rd, 2016. The headline read, "Mother and son disappear from Briar Street. No leads after boyfriend questioned." Below it, a picture of a boy, Toby, maybe 9 years old, grinning with a missing front tooth, and a tired-looking woman. The article named the boyfriend, Rick Munson, age 37. Martha dug deeper, pulling out a more recent clipping from 2 years. "Go Rick Munson applies for foster license after multiple denials." Her jaw clenched. "He's still around," she muttered. "Changed addresses 3 times in 2 years, and I'd bet my good casserole dish he's the one circling this neighborhood." Ellie's voice was small. "What do we do?" Martha looked at her granddaughter, then toward the woods. "We do what your mama would have done." She picked up her phone, not to call the sheriff, not yet. Instead, she called Helen again. "Get me someone who can run a background check. Quietly." Outside, Maple barked sharply once. From the porch, Ellie saw 2 glowing eyes watching from the woods. Not an animal, a man. The next morning was too quiet. Even the birds held their songs. Ellie woke up in a panic, heart pounding with a sense of urgency she couldn't explain. She pushed aside the quilt, dressed in a flash, and raced out the back door. Maple wasn't by the fence like usual. The pups weren't wrestling in the grass. The air felt heavier, like it had soaked up something dark overnight. She slipped under the fence and bolted toward the shed. "Maple," she whispered. "Toby." Nothing. When she reached the shed, her breath caught. The plank Toby had used to seal the corner was pushed wide open. Inside, the blanket was tossed aside, the juice box empty, and in the center of the floor, a rag, soaked in blood. Ellie staggered back, her stomach lurching. No, 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 no. Then she saw the scuff marks, fresh footprints, heavy ones leading out of the shed and deeper into the woods. She turned and sprinted back toward the house. Martha was already on the porch, holding the phone and pacing. "I called Helen," she said quickly. "Rick Munson has a record. Not just bar fights, assault, and 2 missing persons connected to his past relationships. No convictions, he always got off, but now—" She stopped as she saw Ellie's face. "What happened?" Ellie could barely speak. "He's gone. Toby's gone. There's blood." Martha didn't hesitate. She grabbed her coat and keys. "Get in the truck." They followed the trail as far as the truck could go, then got out and pushed through brambles and trees. Maple's barking echoed faintly in the distance. Ellie was the first to see it. A patch of dirt disturbed, and beside it, Maple standing over a piece of torn cloth, barking furiously at a nearby tree line. Then they heard a rustle. A man stumbled. Out from behind a tree, Rick Munson. He looked thinner than the old photos, more haggard, but the cruel squint in his eyes was unmistakable. And his hands, bloody. He froze when he saw Martha. "Well, I'll be," he sneered. Didn't know the old hag still walked. Martha didn't flinch. "Where's the boy?" Rick scoffed. "What boy?" Maple lunged, teeth bared. Ellie grabbed her collar just in time. Rick took a slow step back. "You think you can hide him? Forever. He belongs with me. I raised him after his mama left. Kid owes me." "You raised him like a punching bag," Martha said sharply. "You've got no claim to anyone, and if I find out you hurt that boy—" He suddenly reached behind. "His back!" Ellie screamed. Martha grabbed Ellie and pulled her down just as a glint of metal flashed. But before Rick could lift anything, Maple charged. The shepherd slammed into him with full force. Rick fell hard, cursing as Maple stood over him, growling loud enough to shake the trees. Sirens wailed in the distance. Martha had called the sheriff en route. Red and blue lights cut through the trees as 2 deputies appeared, guns drawn. Rick tried to run. He made it 2 steps before Maple leapt and knocked him to the ground again, snarling. The deputies tackled him, cuffed him, and dragged him away. Ellie ran to the disturbed patch of ground, heart in her throat. "Toby!" She cried, "Help, please!" Then a hand pushed up through the leaves, weak, shaking. Ellie. He was alive. 10 minutes later, the paramedics arrived. Toby was dehydrated, bruised and bloodied from being dragged and hit, but he was conscious. He found me in the night, Toby whispered from the stretcher. Tried to shut me up for good, said if I screamed again he'd bury me out there, but Maple found me. Ellie's tears fell freely now. Maple stood nearby, tail wagging weakly. Her golden eyes locked on Toby like she'd never let him out of her sight again. Martha rested a hand on Ellie's shoulder. That dog's worth her weight in gold. Ellie nodded. She saved him. Martha looked toward the woods. Now we just have to make sure no one ever hurts him again. Toby was safe, but the town was on edge. The story spread fast. Rick Munson arrested in the woods behind the Winslow property, a battered boy rescued by a dog, and a determined little girl. But what the town didn't know was that the boy had been hiding more than just bruises. He carried a secret about his mother. Toby spent 2 days in the hospital under protective watch. Ellie and Martha visited every day. Maple wasn't allowed inside, but she waited by the entrance, resting quietly, as if she knew her job still wasn't done. Toby didn't speak much, until the 3rd day, when Martha brought him a grilled cheese, sandwich and a soda. "Do you remember the night your mom disappeared?" she asked gently. Toby nodded, picking at the crust. His voice was a whisper. "She didn't leave me. She tried to run, with me, but Rick found out. He came home early and started yelling. He hit her. I tried to stop him, but he threw me in the closet." Martha sat quietly, letting him continue. I heard her scream. Then it got quiet. When he opened the door hours later, he told me she'd run off and left me behind. Said no one would believe a little kid. I didn't know what to think. But when he started drinking more, when he got worse, I knew she never left. Tears slipped down Ellie's cheeks. Martha leaned forward. "Toby, do you remember where this happened?" Toby looked up, eyes haunted. "The old cabin. Out on Ash Ridge Road. He used to take us there when he was hiding from the police. Said no one would find us. I think she's still there." Martha's face darkened. "You think he buried her there?" Toby nodded. That evening, after dropping Ellie at home, Martha drove to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Donnelly had been skeptical at first, but after hearing about the cabin, he agreed to reopen the file on Toby's mother. The next morning, a search team headed to Ash Ridge. The cabin was a wreck, mold on the walls, windows shattered. It looked abandoned for years, but the earth behind it was disturbed, subtle, like someone had tried to make it look natural. They brought in a cadaver dog. It took less than 10 minutes. Bones, a woman's watch, and scraps of fabric matching a blouse Toby had described. Confirmation came 2 days later. DNA from the remains matched hospital records for a woman named Angela Madsen, Toby's mother. The town went quiet. Everyone had assumed she'd vanished, fled, given up. But she hadn't. She'd tried to escape and been murdered for it. Rick Munson was formally charged with second-degree murder and child endangerment. His trial would be long, but the evidence was mounting. That night, Martha sat on the porch, a blanket over her knees and Ellie curled beside her. Maple lay at their feet, the pups now tumbling sleepily nearby. "I wish we'd known," Ellie said softly. Martha nodded. "We weren't looking. People like Rick, they hide in plain sight. Charm some, scare others. Most just turn the other way." Ellie's jaw clenched. "He didn't deserve her." "No," Martha said, "but you and Toby, you made sure she didn't stay lost. And sometimes that's the strongest justice of all." Just then, a car pulled up the driveway. Helen stepped out, her face lit by porch light. "I've got good news," she said, smiling at Toby in the back seat. "Toby's been placed with emergency care for now," she told Martha. "But if you're willing, they'd like to consider you for temporary guardianship." Martha blinked. "Me?" Ellie jumped up. "Please, Grandma." Toby stepped forward, voice small. "If it's okay, I'd like to stay, just for a while." Martha looked at him, this brave little boy with tired eyes and a scarred heart, and smiled. "Not just for a while, sweetheart. You've got a home now." For 2 weeks, peace seemed possible. Toby settled into the guest room at the Winslow house, gradually learning to sleep through the night without jumping at creaks or shadows. Maple slept at the foot of his bed, and Ellie made it her mission to include him in everything, from schoolwork to breakfast pancakes. Even the pups had chosen him as their second favorite human, often trailing behind him like furry little guardians. But peace rarely lasts when buried secrets start to rot. It began with a letter. Martha found it tucked inside their mailbox one morning, no stamp, no return address, just her name in jagged handwriting. She opened it at the kitchen table. "You think you're a hero. You don't know what you've stirred up. Drop it. Or next time we won't miss." Inside was a blurry photo. Toby walking home from school with Ellie. The angle suggested someone had taken it from a distance, likely from a vehicle. Martha's blood ran cold. She showed Helen first, then the sheriff. "I thought Rick was behind bars," Martha said. "Who? Kels would want to shut us up." Sheriff Donnelly scratched his beard. "Rick wasn't working alone. There's rumors he ran with rough people a few years back. Someone who helped him stay hidden all that time. Maybe even someone who helped cover up that body." "Are you saying there's still someone out there willing to hurt that boy?" Martha asked, her voice sharp. The sheriff didn't answer right away, but his silence said enough. That night, Martha installed new locks, motion lights, and a camera on the front porch. She didn't tell Toby about the letter, not yet, but she started picking him up from school herself. And Ellie noticed how her grandma now carried a little silver pistol tucked into her coat. Something was wrong again. She could feel it. The next warning wasn't subtle. It came just after sundown. Ellie and Toby were walking Maple and the pups through the back trail, not far from the shed where it all began. The air was warm and Toby seemed lighter than usual, even daring to race the puppies through the weeds. That's when the sound came. Tires, crunching gravel. A rusted blue pickup. Truck pulled up onto the ridge above the trail and stopped. The windows were tinted. No one stepped out. Maple froze. A low growl rose from her throat. "Ellie," Toby said, grabbing her arm. "We need to go, now." They ran. Branches whipped at their faces. The pups barked behind them. Maple stayed close to Toby, watching his every move. The truck didn't follow, but it didn't have to. The message was clear. They reached home breathless, scraped and trembling. Martha didn't ask questions. She made 2 calls, one to Helen, one to Sheriff Donnelly. By nightfall, a patrol car was parked outside their driveway, and a deputy was sleeping in the den, shotgun within reach. Toby sat on the porch swing, quiet. "He was there," he said suddenly. "I saw him once, a year ago. When Rick took me to the cabin. Said his name was Eddie. Had a snake tattoo on his neck. He gave Rick something in a black bag, and then he looked at me and said, 'If you ever talk, you won't live long enough to regret it.'" Martha's eyes narrowed. "Did you ever tell anyone that before?" Toby shook his head. "I didn't think he was real. I thought maybe Rick was just trying to scare me." "Not anymore," Martha said. "This Eddie, he's real and he's watching." Just then, the porch light flickered. Maple growled again, standing now at the edge of the porch. The deputy stepped outside, flashlight raised. "Stay inside." He disappeared into the dark. There was a scuffle, something fell. A loud thump, then silence. Martha grabbed her coat, her hand already on the pistol. "Ellie, lock the door, do not come out." But Ellie couldn't move, because out beyond the trees, 2 yellow eyes blinked from the shadows. Not Maple's. Someone was out there, and they weren't done. The night swallowed the farm whole. Martha stood at the front door, gun shaking in her hand, trying to steady her breathing. Ellie was behind her, frozen in the hall, clinging to Toby. Maple stood rigid at the edge of the porch, her fur raised, a low growl vibrating through her chest. The flashlight beam from the deputy's belt flickered once more, then vanished completely. Something had happened to him. Then was a whisper on the wind, tires movement. From the woods to the east, the rusted blue truck emerged again, slower this time. It rolled to a stop just past the mailbox. The driver's door opened with a screech that cut through the silence like a knife. A man stepped out. Tall, thin, snake tattoo curling up his neck. His face looked like cracked leather, and his eyes were too calm, like he'd done this 100 times before. "Evening," he called, voice oily. "I think you've got something of mine." Martha cocked the pistol and stepped down onto the porch. "The only thing I've got is a safe home, and you're not taking that from me." The man smirked. "Rick's gone because he was careless, but me, I finish things." Behind him, another man stepped from the passenger side. Bigger. He held a metal pipe, the kind that made sure there were no second chances. Maple barked ferociously. The pups yipped behind her, confused by the tension. "Go inside," Martha whispered to Ellie and Toby, but Toby didn't budge. "That's him," he said. "That's Eddie." Ellie reached for the phone, her fingers dialing the sheriff's number. Eddie heard it. Now, he sneered. "No need for heroes. This don't need to get messy if you just send the boy out." "He's not yours," Martha said. That was the moment Eddie drew his own weapon. But before he could aim, Maple launched. The shepherd became a blur of muscle and fury, teeth clamping down on Eddie's wrist. The gun clattered to the ground. He screamed, trying to throw her off. The second man swung the pipe wildly, hitting Maple across the ribs. She yelped, but didn't let go. Then the front porch light burst open. A second later, the patrol cruisers. Red and blue lights exploded across the road. Sheriff Donnelly's voice boomed, "Drop the weapon and get on the ground." The man with the pipe froze, arm mid-swing. Maple released Eddie and backed off just enough to guard Toby, teeth still bared. Eddie made one last mistake. He reached for the gun on the ground. A single shot rang out. He hit the dirt, screaming, as a bullet tore through his shoulder. Deputies swarmed in from both sides, pinning the two men down, cuffing them roughly. Ellie watched from behind the screen door, trembling. Toby didn't move. He simply walked over to Maple, dropped to his knees and threw his arms around her neck. "You saved me again," he whispered into her fur. 2 weeks later, Eddie was charged with attempted murder, conspiracy to commit a violent crime, and obstruction. In the Madsen case, he was tied not just to Rick's crimes, but to at least 3 others across state lines. His network unraveled like rotting thread. Toby was granted permanent guardianship to Martha Winslow. The judge called it the safest and most loving placement he'd ever seen. The summer that followed was different. The house was louder now, filled with laughter, barking puppies, the occasional burned pancake. Toby still had nightmares, but fewer, and when he woke up it was to the sound of Maple's tail thumping beside his bed and Ellie softly saying, "You're okay. You're home." One evening, as the sun dipped behind the woods, Martha sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the kids play fetch with Maple and the pups. "I still can't believe how it all began," Ellie said, tossing a stick. "Yeah," Toby nodded. "Just me hiding behind a shed." "Me watching some puppies," Ellie grinned, and a hand, Martha added from behind them, emerging from the shadows. They all went quiet for a moment. Then Ellie laughed. "Guess that hand saved all of us in a weird way." Martha smiled. "No, honey, you saved him. With your curiosity, your courage, and that dog, she's something special." Maple barked once, as if in agreement.